you want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today. We are live every Sunday at 3 p.m. You can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
In today's world, video is the most effective content. In 2021 alone, 80% of all content consumed by users was video. If today you don't make video about yourself, about your product, you're losing positions in your business. Afrique Today Production invites you to create a video of any complexity. Are you an aspiring blogger, artist, musician, and you want to surprise your audience? Or are you an ordinary person and want to create a family story? Then our team will be able to create a video for you with unique quality, reported shooting, individual shooting, studio shooting, entertainment videos, corporate events. All this we can do for you in the best quality. Just call now and get a 30% discount at 571-612-0496. 571-612-0496. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
Welcome, and happy Friday. Welcome to the Voice of AAU. I am your host, Dr. Yvette Butler-Yaboa, and my co-host, the Invisible Man, will be with us soon. Hopefully you'll see him next week, but I'm really excited to have to be here this evening to bring some really interesting information to everyone out there. But we're really glad to be here today. And as you know, we usually start the show off a little differently. We have Did You Know? But we want to give more time because this is political season. And during political season, we need to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to hear from women, powerful women, women of color who are leading us into the next generation. And it's not that I'm biased because I'm a woman. But guess what? It's all about women for this election. And so we're excited today to have 2 amazing young ladies. And I am not going to take time to show you any videos this time. We'll do some of that later on because I want to get to talking to them because I don't want to run out of time. And we have hour-long shows, so we have to start sticking to the hour, they said. So we're going to stick to that hour, but we want to make sure that you hear from these 2 young ladies who are running for office, who need your support. It's a woman's world. We need you. And we need you to come out in force. And men, what do they say about a woman? Every strong man has a woman by his side. So we know that we'll get your support as well. So I won't really talk much more about that, but I'm going to tell you about the 2 wonderful candidates I have today. And I'm going to let them tell you a little about themselves. We have with us today Brandy Brooks, who is running for Montgomery County Council at large. And the first time we ever had a Black female run for office was Valerie Irvin. We need another one in office, not appointed, but in office, elected by the people. And we've never, ever had a state's attorney of color or female. And we're excited to have, you saw Price our last time, and I'll I always mess her name up. I'll say Bernice North, and I'm gonna let her say her other name for you. But Bernice North, who's a wonderful good friend as well, she's running for state's attorney from Montgomery County. Both these women working together could make change for us here in this county that can be a ripple effect across the nation. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Brandy on and let Brandy Brooks tell you a little bit about herself and why she's running for Montgomery County Council. Brandy, thank you, and welcome to the voice of, and they say AAU, that's American Africans United, because we are all united as one. Brandy, tell us a little about yourself and why are you running for Montgomery County Council?
Absolutely. Dr. Butler, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here on the voice of AAU. Thank you to all your listeners for tuning in. My name is Brandy Brooks. I live in Kensington, Maryland, here in Montgomery County, and I'm very excited to be running for Montgomery County Council at large. This is my second time running for this office. I ran for the first time in 2018 in a very wild 33-person Democratic primary for those 4 seats. And it was a pretty crazy experience. I hope that no one else has to go through a 33-person primary because it's not as fun as it sounds. But what we were very excited about is that was my first time running for office. The first campaign that I had ever worked on was my own. And even with that, we were able to do a tremendous job of organizing grassroots support behind the leadership of a progressive Afro-Latina, not someone who comes from wealth, but someone who had a vision for our communities and for the way that we could be centering justice and equity and dignity for everyone in Montgomery County. It was so exciting what we were able to do in that election. And based on that support, I decided to run a second time. We've been at it for about a year, just a little over a year now, and it has been amazing, this second campaign. I am running because I believe, quite simply, that we need better representation. We need representation that is going to reflect the true diversity, not only of race and ethnicity, but of a variety of dimensions of lived experience here in our county. Folks who know what it is like to grow up and come from working in middle-class families, to face things like housing and food insecurity and economic insecurity, folks who are renters like I am right now, and who can really speak to the pressing needs that we're facing in Montgomery County around affordable housing, around evictions, around wage inequality, around racial injustice and segregation in our communities and our schools, around police brutality and violence and the way that that disproportionately impacts people in our communities. People who can talk about how land use and transportation and economic development can either be tools for building the prosperity of everyone in our county or can be tools for maintaining injustice and inequality. These are the things that are deeply important to me as someone who has been working in social and environmental justice for more than 15 years. And I'm excited to bring all of that experience, my experience as an organizer, working with communities to bring them together to be the decision makers around the policies that impact our lives. And I think that that's the kind of leadership that we need in Montgomery County right now to make sure that we are bringing our full wisdom and experience to solve the pressing issues that we are facing today.
And before I bring Bernice on, I want to ask you, Brandy, tell us, who is Brandy Brooks?
Sure. Well, let's see. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm an auntie. I have my parents are amazing. At an event that I had just this past weekend, I was talking about the way that my family has inspired me and instilled so many values in me around community care. I love my sisters. Actually, my sister Michelle is my campaign manager, and that tells you something about the quality of our relationship, because going through a campaign for a year with your sister as your campaign manager, with your mom as a treasurer, you all have to be close and you have to know how to work stuff out, or that's going to be a whole disaster. So it's really wonderful to have my family supporting me, my nephews and my niece. They are my beautiful heart, and they're what inspire me. They're what drive me to make sure that we're creating a better future. I'm someone who loves to sing and dance. You know, if we had a little karaoke hour on here, we could do a little bit of that too. And you know, I like to try. It's a big reason why I like to try and bring joy and wellness and fun and excitement to the way that we are thinking about campaigns and politics, because that's the way that I want to be living my life. That's what I want my community to be able to experience. So that's a little bit about who I am.
Well, I'm glad you said it, because I always wonder, now who is Brandy Brooks? So I'm going to bring in our next guest and let her tell you a little bit about herself and why she is running for state's attorney. And then we're going to really get into some questions here that I was flooded with questions today, so that's why we kind of changed the way we did the show. So you guys have some questions that the audience want to hear, because these shows are not only live, but they're archived for you to send out and have people know who you are and to be viewed again and again. So without further ado, I see Bernice. And Bernice, you know, I didn't want to mess up your real Ghanaian name, and I love it. Bernice and I I said we have something in common. She's married to an American, and she's Ghanaian. I'm American. I'm married to a wonderful Ghanaian man. So, my Ghanaian sister, could you please tell me a little bit about why you're running for state's attorney, and then tell me who is Bernice North?
First, let me unmute myself, and then I can start over again.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Okay.
For the sake of reality TV, I should explain who I am first, because I have, my reason to my right, who insist on joining the fun tonight. So I'm a wife, a mother of a 5-year-old daughter, and a daughter of Ghanaian immigrants, and I spent my livelihood being a courtroom lawyer and a community advocate. I grew up in Montgomery County public schools. I was attended public schools in Montgomery County, and after clerkships in DC and Prince George's County, I became a prosecutor in Anne Arundel County for almost 6 years before going to private practice. And now currently I am out on my own doing criminal defense work and adult guardianship cases. I've also spent a good deal of my career as a community advocate. Most recently, I led the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, which provided 87 recommendations on public safety reform. And it was during that experience where I really realized that there was a disconnect between the status quo and what the community was looking for. And I spent several years in the community as a prosecutor and just generally as a engaged citizen, trying to come up with ways of reimagining public safety even before it became a catchphrase. And what I learned in my experience is that you can be in all the task force and all the groups, but if you don't change the leadership, nothing's going to change. The incumbent has been there for 16 years, and I feel after this many years, there's a different vision that's needed to make sure we understand what justice really is in Montgomery County. So I decided to step up and be that voice and be that new vision that we need in Montgomery County. And that's why I decided to run. I think we need a prosecutor that focuses on greater transparency and accountability. We need a prosecutor that focuses on alternatives to incarceration, not just before jail, but before people even enter in the system to begin with. We also need a prosecutor that focuses on equity and fairness, and that's in how we hire people in the office and how we decide what cases to go forward on. Having an equity lens is very critical, as well as a lens focused on fairness. And lastly, I want to make sure that we have a prosecutor that doesn't focus on just locking people up or getting the conviction, but actually seeking justice and restoring and stabilizing communities, because that's what real justice is about. And that's what the role of a prosecutor is about. It's not just about being a chief law enforcement officer. That's a gimmick. The actual definition of a prosecutor is someone who's going to seek justice, an administrator of justice, not someone who's out to convict. So that's some of the reasons why I'm running. And I don't take this lightly. As you can see, it's Friday night and my girl wants to party. But I'm still here because I am devoted to making sure that everybody knows how important this race is. When there is an arrest made out in the streets, it is the prosecutor that determines what charges are filed. And those charges can set you on a course of disaster, or depending if you're the victim, it can be a sense of relief. And you need a prosecutor who understands all facets of the system and has empathy towards all those involved to make sure that we actually are administering justice for Montgomery County. As diverse as it is, it's 1/3 foreign born. So we have a unique opportunity here to actually have a leader in the state's attorney's office that understands the diversity and is empathetic towards it and is willing to seek justice for everybody involved, not just the few.
Well, thank you so much, and do not worry about your little one there. And I want to, before we even
Oh,
go further, I
I'm
want to
not
thank
worried.
both of you. I want to thank both of you for giving me this time tonight, because Friday nights are the time to get out and do everything and be with your families. Thank you so much for spending the time with the voice of AAU and myself. So we really appreciate that.
I do just want to take a minute to, to salute one of the things we talk about in terms of the leadership of women, the leadership of femmes and folks who have had that traditional role as caregivers, is the way that we understand intimately what it looks like to have to balance the professional side of our lives and the personal, what it looks like to always having to attend to care for people as part of the way that we do business. So I really appreciate it. I've gotten to see Bernice's daughter at a lot of different events. I know my niece comes out with me to a lot of events as well. And I really appreciate that that's something that's different about the leadership that we're able to bring, is that understanding of how these issues, whether we're talking about criminal justice, whether we're talking about housing, transportation, all of these different issues, how they are intimately connected to the ways that our families work on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and you mentioned housing, and that's what we're going to dive right into first. A few questions around housing, and we've gotten these questions. Actually, I put them in sections because people ask about housing, then health, criminal justice, and so on. So you said about housing, and as we know, Montgomery County is one of the most expensive counties to live in.
Yeah.
And we always talk about affordable housing. So, Brandy, first I want you to address this from the county council side and what you would do. And first of all, tell me, do you support affordable housing? And what does affordable housing really look like to you? Because it might look like something different to someone else. So what is really affordable housing?
Absolutely. And this is truly one of the most critical questions. It's one of the questions that I get most often when I am out on the campaign trail, people asking, what are we going to do about the housing situation in Montgomery County? Because it is dire. We have had an affordable housing crisis for a long time. We have had an eviction crisis for a long time. The pandemic has only made those things more acute, but it absolutely did not create them. And there's a lot of conversation. I do advocacy work within the housing world, and there's all this conversation about affordable and attainable housing. And people toss these words around like buzzwords, but they mean real, actual things to people. When you are looking at your family budget, when you are looking at your household budget and trying to figure out whether you can afford the rent or afford the mortgage, affordable housing isn't just some buzzword. It's a thing that has concrete impacts on your ability to care for yourself and your loved ones. And there's a standard for this, right? This actually it's not magical thinking. The standard for housing affordability is that a household shouldn't be paying more than 30% of their monthly income in housing costs. And that includes not only the rent, but the utilities, the other things that are part of your housing costs. And when we look at that, so Montgomery County is in the process of raising its minimum wage to $15 an hour. Large employers who employ over 50 people are now required to do that. Smaller employers are continuing to be phased in over the next couple of years. And what that would mean for someone working a minimum wage job, which many people do, even though we like to pretend that the only people working minimum wage jobs are young kids who don't need to pay the bills or other folks who don't actually carry households. People who are the head of household earn minimum wage or work minimum wage jobs. And in order for a person working a minimum wage job to be able to afford the rent on an apartment, it would have to be somewhere in the vicinity of about $600 a month. Now, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen a $600 a month apartment in Montgomery County literally ever. But that's the actual standard for affordability. So when we talk about this, we can't be talking as if there aren't hard numbers attached to this. We can't, we have to be talking about a standard for where we set rents currently so that they are actually within people's budget and people aren't what we call rent burdened, which is folks who are paying 50, 60% or more of their monthly income on housing every month. And that's not sustainable, because when you're in that position, you are seriously looking at your checkbook, you're seriously looking at your bank account every month, and you are saying, okay, is it rent? Is it food? Is it my medications? Is it clothes? And you are having to try and make that choice every single month. Is it keeping the heating on? Is it having a phone? Is it having internet connectivity, which is not a luxury anymore in our society, but an essential utility? And we should not be creating a situation where people have to look at their budgets every month and figure out which one of those essential things they're going to let go of for that particular month. And this is happening to our young people. This is happening to families. This is happening to seniors. Across the board, people are facing this. So I strongly believe that we have to be doing everything possible, using every available tool to make sure that we are producing enough affordable housing, because we need tens of thousands of units of affordable housing in Montgomery County to meet the demand. And that means that we can't solely be relying on programs like the MPDU, or Moderately Priced Dwelling Unit Program, which does some level of affordability for people who make about 60 to 80% of area median income, which means $60,000 to $80,000 more or less. And now bear in mind, that's about twice as much as twice or more as much as someone making minimum wage. So already you're going to a totally different earnings bracket to even be able to afford the affordable housing standard that we have in our county. And even then, those MPDUs, you're not seeing those priced at, $1,200. You're still seeing those things. People are looking at affordability as, $15,000, $2,000 if you're trying to actually find a family home. And that's what we start to consider affordability. So we have to not only be doing MPDUs, but partnering seriously with developers who want to be building large quantities of affordable housing in their developments, not 12 or 15%, but 50, 60, 80, 100% affordable housing developments. And when we are giving subsidies, when we are letting people make use of public land, or when we are selling public land, or when we are giving tax breaks to developers, it needs to be tied to those kinds of levels of affordability. And we need to make sure that we are serious about seeking the kinds of development partners who want to work with us to actually solve the affordable housing problem in Montgomery County, and not continue with this kind of trickle down housing economics that we have continued to think is going to work for us, where if we just build enough luxury and market rate, which is still not affordable housing for people, that somehow eventually there will be enough affordable housing to actually house the rest of us in this county. That's not sustainable. And we need leadership that is going to take this problem as seriously as it deserves and treat it as a crisis. And and I do want to note that we haven't even talked about the eviction crisis. And I want to pause. I know I want to let Bernice get in on this too. But one of the reasons that I wanted to mention eviction is because this does tie to our court system as well, and how we handle and how we set up our courts and our law enforcement, either to support and people staying in their homes, or to make it easier to kick people out of their homes. And eviction is a key place where we see that battle happening.
Well, I was actually going to roll that over about the evictions right over to Bernice to give feedback on, as a state's attorney, as our next state's attorney from Montgomery County, what leverage and what can you do as far as and I want to roll right into the evictions. And if you want to comment also on the affordable housing, you can. But what is the state's attorney's role, and what can they do when it comes to evictions and the criminality of it? And just give me a little bit more of your background. What do you think?
The one thing about some of these atrocities really in our society, like the eviction crisis, is that people will automatically think, oh God, it's so bad, it's criminal. But it actually, unfortunately, is not. Evictions is a civil issue, and agencies like the Legal Aid Office would be able to assist people in that. But one thing that I have really been looking into is code enforcement violations. Most recently, unfortunately, the massive deaths in I believe it was the Bronx apartment had several violations, and several kids and family members were killed. But it was an building that had issued with code enforcements for quite a long time. And I remember hearing some rumblings in, at least in Twitter and some of the community saying, well, it should be criminal. It should be criminal. And I think it's a matter of having a prosecutor who is administrative of justice really be the bullhorn, saying, look, this is not appropriate. This is a misgiving of justice. What can we do? And talking to legislators about it, because at the end of the day, the way the statute works is that this role of a state's attorney is created by the state of Maryland. So you end up having a lot of opportunities to work with the legislators as partners in trying to achieve greater justice. And so things like the eviction crisis and even affordable housing, those are things that there's some sort of criminality component that I might see is coming down the pipeline, then that's something to alert stakeholders like the Maryland legislators on. And I think that's a very unique role for a prosecutor. It's not just the fact that we are prosecuting cases once it gets in the room, but kind of being the eyes and ears of justice in the system. And one other point I wanted to make is with respect to affordable housing and eviction crisis, those are things that should be considered when someone gets a criminal charge. I think that's very critical. When I become an state's attorney, I want to change the way we do our screening process with charges. I want to bring on a social worker, a data analyst, and a racial justice analyst to determine three things. One, a social worker, what diversion programs or what resources are out there that the person isn't getting that led them to this situation where they're charged with a crime by the police or by the commissioner's office. I want a data analyst to determine whether we're actually doing an effective job in sending these people to diversionary measures. And three, also want to see in terms of the racial justice component, whether there's a disproportionate amount of charges happening. Like if all the cases in Gaithersburg happen to be with a particular group, like Black men. Those are things that we need to be aware of and track very vigorously in order to make sure that we really have a justice system that's working for everyone and a justice system that people can trust in.
Well, thank you so much. Oh, we have our invisible man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. I finally got enough technology to get on. I'd like to ask a question.
Let me introduce you first. Let me introduce you first to our two guests, because our audience knows you as Invisible Man. This is my co-host who has had some technological difficulties since we changed over to a new system. So do welcome the Invisible Man. We have Brandy Brooks, who's running for county council at large. And as you know, Bernice, you didn't say your last name for me though. You're
Bernice Maricu North.
Maricu, and I'm Bernice Maricu North, who actually will be, both of these young ladies will be in office as our county council and our new state's attorney and first Black ever state's attorney in the history of Maryland. So go ahead, Invisible Man.
Well, I'm happy to finally be heard. I'm still invisible though. What you said, Miss North, I believe, in terms of men, I was in a situation dealing with housing, and the landlord was just so bad. I had to go to housing court, and at one point, the only way that you could get any justice was to say that you were afraid of being hurt by the person, but that wasn't the case. So as it turned out, the person was not very forthcoming. So the case was dismissed, and then they were not happy, so they took me back to court. And again, it was thrown out again. So finally, I was able to move. Now, you said the criminality part. I'm a peaceful person, but it sure makes you want to do something. So when you just said about having a social worker and someone to analyze data and so forth, I think those are fantastic suggestions. So I'm really
Thank
happy to have heard that, and I think it's very important. Thank you.
Welcome. And the reason why I'm so vocal about this, because at the time we're in right now in our society, especially with the Biden administration, there's money out there to support these initiatives. Really reimagining public safety is on the table this term. It's on the table, and the status quo hasn't touched it. Most recently, the Department of Justice offered a slew of money to states' attorneys and other agencies to reinvent or reimagine how they're doing public safety. Anne Arundel County got some money. Arlington County got some money. Montgomery County, as diverse as it is, the largest jurisdiction in the state of Maryland, I don't even know if they even applied for it. So now is the time to really reinvent how we're doing criminal justice in Montgomery County, because the support is out there.
If I may, very quickly, you threw out a terrible word, criminal justice. Now, I know that you are involved in law enforcement. You've been a prosecutor. You have done defense work. Now you want to go back to prosecuting people again. I don't know why, but I want to say this. There was a young man who was at a McDonald's recently. I don't know if you heard about the case. He had been going through personal struggles, and he was living in his car. And unfortunately, he had a weapon, and a weapon was seen in the car, and he was summarily killed right there by the McDonald's here up on Flower Hill Road.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Ryan
just so dangerous, So if you could address for someone listening, if they have a registered gun, unregistered gun, or however you want to take it, it's very serious today.
Mm-hmm. And those moments remind me of, when I was a prosecutor, whenever I had a case that I thought there was something fishy about it, wasn't quite right, I was not afraid to challenge the officer on that, the charging officer. Sometimes they wouldn't like what I had to say. But when I saw them again, they did a better job. They followed the rules. They followed what was appropriate in those circumstances. And that's the kind of leadership that I feel is missing in that office. The prosecutor's office and the police department, as a function of the system, they have to work together. But when you have a prosecutor is willing to challenge law enforcement, to criticize them for the sake of keeping everyone safe, then that's what we have to do for Montgomery County. And just rubber stamping what the police do isn't what we need. It isn't justice. And I think in that particular circumstance, if they're, especially with the rise in registered guns, just generally, that's something that could have been explained to the chief of police, which will go down to the to other officers in command, say, hey, look, in these situations, don't do what this guy did, right? That's really critical, because having a prosecutor say that to the chiefs of police and the various jurisdictions is powerful. It's powerful because when the police make their arrests or when they're out on the streets, they want to make sure their work is actually not in vain. Okay. So that is why it's so important to have a prosecutor with empathy and understanding, and a real focus on racial justice and social justice. Because if they don't like what the prosecutor is saying, if they got to leave, they have to leave. I mean, it's happened. It's happened across the country where chiefs of police saying, hey, look, I don't want to deal with this anymore. This is not what I signed up for. Then that's fine. Because at the end of the day, they have to talk to their line officers as to what to do. And if they're not comfortable doing that, then they're not going to lead well, and then they don't want to stay. But by inherent in the system are the police and the prosecutors. And if you don't have those two agencies working together to make sure that everyone is treated fairly and equitably, then we're going to have more Ryan LaRue's, unfortunately, because there's that disconnect between what the community feels is safe and appropriate and what the officers have been trained to do.
Thank you.
Thank you
Go
so
ahead.
much.
I
Now,
want to ask
I have a
Brooks
few
a
more
question real
questions on
quick.
health. Oh, you have another question?
Yeah, I want to get Miss Brooks, if I may. Miss Brooks.
Sure. I'm happy to talk about this similar question.
How do you, no. This is a new question.
Great.
How do you get anything done since you have so many pies and hands and fingers and everything. What's the most important thing that you think out of all of the things that you do? What stands out as the number one?
So are we talking about in my organizing life currently, or
Yeah,
you
you
thinking
you
about that?
you 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 have such an impressive background. I don't know where to start, so I want you to start. What is the
Okay.
most important activity that you are involved in?
Got it. Well, the thing that I focus the most of my energy on, besides running for office, which takes a lot of time and energy,
Yes, ma'am.
is my work. I am the co-director of a nonprofit consulting firm called One Square World. And what we do is that we develop policy processes that are grounded in community decision making. So we really support the leadership and capacity of community members to participate in setting the agenda and setting the priorities and actually developing the policy for environmental and climate related policy. And we do that so that the kinds of policy outcomes that we get really represent and respect the needs and interests of the most vulnerable people in our community, including people of color, people with low and moderate incomes, seniors, renters, and other folks who typically get ignored in policy. And then we also do that so that we ultimately get more sustainable outcomes because we believe that you don't have environmental sustainability unless you also actually have racial equity, economic equity. These things can't be separated because the root causes of environmental destruction and degradation go hand in hand with the root causes of the way that we degrade and mistreat each other as people. And they always go together. And so that's the work that I do every day. It's exciting. It's wonderful. We've gotten to work in cities and with organizations all across the country. A lot of our work is focused in the New England region, but we've done some work here in Montgomery County too, actually around the Racial Equity and Social Justice Act, supporting community organizing here to make sure that the way that that law was passed included amendments that are important to the community, and folks organizing here around looking at what a Green New Deal would look like for Montgomery County. So legislation that would really look to make changes for climate and sustainability, but again, be rooted in racial and economic justice and equity. So that's the work I love. It's work that's a culmination of a lot of stuff that I've been doing for a long time. And it's also work that shows very clearly that we can do participatory policymaking. We can do policy development in partnership with community members, and we can build tremendous groundbreaking policy by doing that. So I want to bring that experience into Montgomery County in the way that I want to serve on the county council, because I know that it can be done, because I've been part of doing it in multiple places around the country.
Okay, I'm afraid to
Okay,
ask
Brandy,
any
we're going
more
to skip you for a
questions.
second here because I want to. There was a question that came out from today about health, and actually not health. I'll say COVID, and so then I just want you to answer this question. Then we'll go to commercial break, and then we'll bring back on really talk about some criminal justice issues that are
Okay.
affecting us currently. So
Mhm.
they want to know, what is your position on handling COVID, especially as it relates to the no mask mandate. Also, for persons who refuse to be vaccinated, what is your take on the situation? And do you think they have the right to say no? And thirdly, schools and the back and forward of mask, no mask. Whose voices will you listen to most? Or will you listen closely to the health officers of the county, or will you go with your constituents?
So here's what I'm going to say about this is that one, this is a confusing time with a rapidly emerging and constantly changing disease that all of us are trying to keep up with. And what we have to do in that situation is try and trust our best knowledge and our best science. The science is very clear. Masking up is one of the number one things that we can be doing, that we should have been doing all along to stop the spread. Because I don't know about y'all, but I am not happy about being in year 3 of COVID. I would like this to be over. So I am deeply committed to making sure that we mask up, that remains a public policy mandate until we have actually gotten this under control. Because here's the thing about public health. Public health isn't about just what any individual person's preference is. It's about recognizing the impact of our individual choices on the collective. It's why we have things like vaccine mandates for folks going into schools, elementary schools and to colleges, because we know that things like the spread of polio is not good for any of us in our community, even if someone individually feels that they are not at risk for that, that the costs are too high. And when it comes to things like vaccine mandates, I know a lot of folks have concerns about how the vaccines were developed, that process. Those concerns are real. I know that also for folks in communities of color, and especially for Black folks, the history of medical malpractice, like of grotesque malpractice against Black bodies and medical violence against Black bodies, is a real part of our history. And I think we are all struggling to try and figure out how to navigate that. And I want to acknowledge that that's real. But I believe in making public policy based on our best available science, being sure that we are holding our health officials accountable to looking rigorously at that science and understanding and trying to give us the most accurate information that they can, and to being responsive as new information comes out. But that's how I try and make policy, is based on the evidence that we have available to do so. We have to shift when there's new evidence, but right now, the evidence that I'm seeing, that I've heard, is that one, masking up is that's point blank what we need to be doing. And two, that as much as possible, we need to be having folks vaccinated. There may be times when there are health or other kinds of exceptions, but as much as possible, we need to be encouraging vaccination so that we can move out of this phase of COVID and into a place where we are not constantly, look, I'm not an epidemiologist, and all of us, all 300 million plus of us, are trying to be epidemiologists, looking at graphs going back and forth and trying to figure out how to navigate this. It's an unbelievably stressful situation. It's putting tremendous stress on children, parents, workers, folks walking around their daily lives, people who are trying to run businesses, people who are trying to run educational institutions. So my goal is to figure out what's the evidence that we have about how we navigate best toward the end of this situation. Because it's an ongoing public health catastrophe and collective trauma that it's going to take us years to recover from on a lot of dimensions.
Yes, thank you, Sadie. Before we go on break, Bernice, do you want to weigh in on that at all?
I would just say that, COVID has really wreaked havoc on the court system. When I was, I had a case in March, I think it was like March 16th, something like that. And it was the Monday after the court shut down. And it was at a time where there was ambiguity as to which court was shutting down, because the chief judge says one thing, but the administrative law judge for each county says something different. And that's really was my week in March. I remember that very vividly. I said, okay, well, here we go, right? And then 2 years later, I'm just getting notice today that March 7th, I believe, as of today, is the day that jury trials are back up and running. Everything's in normal operation. So you think about the fact that there's so many people in the system that have been detained since COVID, that have been so disconnected that they might not want to appear in court. So things are lagging behind, and having a prosecutor in the state's attorney's office that recognizes that and is willing to support things like virtual hearings, particularly for traffic offenses, things that don't necessarily lead to potential incarceration. That's really the fear with the criminal cases, is that, well, what if someone's incarcerated? You can't send them to jail from a Zoom, right? But situating these cases so that we can move them as quickly as possible, so we can get to some sense of re-normalcy, whatever that phrase means, but a new normal for us in the criminal justice system, where we're not backlogged by all these cases and all these trials. I've just heard recently that a lot of the minor traffic cases, they're not getting hearings. They're just kind of hanging out in the wind because of the overwhelming amount of backlog in district court misdemeanor cases and felonies, particularly district court misdemeanors, because that is where minor traffic cases are heard. So yeah, COVID has wreaked a lot of havoc in the court system, and having a prosecutor just be a partner in being expeditious in how we're getting these cases resolved through virtual means or other technology, or just being flexible as to whether we need to have certain people in the courtroom or not, is critical.
Well, thank you, thank you. So we're going to take a real quick commercial break, and I want you to watch this video, and then we're going to really dive into talking about how the county council and the state's attorneys can make a difference in the impact they can have. So let's take this commercial break, and we'll come right back.
Do you want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today. We are live every Sunday at 3 p.m. You can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
We turn now to the investigation in New Jersey tonight into how police handled a fight between 2 teens at a mall. The governor tonight saying that he finds the video disturbing. Video showing the fight and then the police response. One teen appearing to be left alone, sitting down on a couch, while the other is pinned on the floor and then handcuffed. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy tonight saying he is disturbed by what appears to be racially disparate treatment of the boys. ABC's Stephanie Ramos from New Jersey.
Tonight, authorities investigating the use of force of 2 officers in New Jersey after this video surfaced, raising questions of racial bias in policing. A fight breaking out at the Bridgewater Mall in New Jersey over the weekend. Police respond and tackle one teen to the ground while the other sits down on a couch and is then left sitting alone as both officers cuff 8th grader Kai, who spoke to ABC station WABC.
The male officer put his knee in my back, and then he started putting me in cuffs, and then the female officer came over, put her knee like on my upper back too, and it started like helping putting cuffs on me, and while he was just sitting down on the couch watching the whole thing.
In the video, you can see the other teen holding up his hands to be handcuffed, but the officer walks right past him. Bridgewater Township Police releasing a statement saying in part, "We recognize that this video has made members of our community upset and are calling for an internal affairs investigation." New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy speaking about the incident today.
We have to let the investigation play out. The appearance of what is racially disparate treatment is deeply, deeply disturbing.
Tonight, Kai's mom is calling for accountability.
To be honest, I want them to become unemployable.
The mall here in Bridgewater released a statement saying they are aware of the incident and that both young individuals have been banned from this property for the next 3 years. David.
All right, Stephanie Ramos tonight. Stephanie, thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News.
In today's world, video is the most effective content. In 2021 alone, 80% of all content consumed by users was video. If today you don't make video about yourself, about your product, you're losing positions in your business. Afrique Today production invites you to create a video of any complexity. Are you an aspiring blogger, artist, musician, and you want to surprise your audience? Or are you an ordinary person and want to create a family story? Then our team will be able to create a video for you with unique quality, reported shooting, individual shooting, studio shooting, entertainment videos, corporate events. All this we can do for you in the best quality. Just call now and get a 30% discount at 571-612-0496. 571-612-0496. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
Now we're going to come right back to Bernice now on that one. And then we're going to come back to you, Brandy. Now, As you look at what happened, question that I have, and my Invisible Man, you might want to jump in here on it as well. Do you believe the criminal justice system disproportionately impacts certain communities? And if so, how do they do it? And what is your remedies to really place things and make the criminal justice system more accountable or more just?
Well, the short answer is yes. I mean, the system is inherently racist. That is unfortunately, the root of the criminal justice system. Even with police, they used to be slave catchers. I mean, that's the historical nature of our law enforcement and criminal justice system. It just evolved into, what is now, thankfully, a push against that, a push to seek justice and not just criminalization, particularly of our young Black men. And that video, I'm thinking about what the officers were thinking, and I've seen that thought process happen before. I've seen it happen before. I remember a case in Montgomery County I had, this is years ago, where this, college-educated Black man, I think he was he was in fitness of some sort, and he was harassed by his white neighbor. I mean, just incessantly harassed. And he didn't put up with it anymore. And at the end of the day, he's the one that got the assault charge. He's the one that was found guilty after him basically being bullied by his neighbor. I mean, and there was no appropriate remedy for that. Conviction was not the solution. And having a prosecutor who understands the historical context of racial relations in America, especially with young Black men, that should be handled way differently. Those are the issues, especially in Montgomery County, that we don't talk about, because this county is so diverse that people think alone means that we're not racist. But that's not true. That's not true.
Totally untrue.
We have to constantly attack that. I mean, even with George Floyd, the racial reckoning that happened in really all of the counties in this country, as to how we are treating individuals through law enforcement. I won the racial reckoning years ago. I mean, I can go on and on about the stories, but also one more story. Even not with Black men, but with Latinos. When driving without a license used to be a 60-day incarcerable offense, the number of Latinos that I saw that were getting maximum penalties just because they had no way to get a license, that was unjust. Those are the types of that's the type of lens that is needed for Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office. Understanding the injustices that occur among our Black and brown communities is critical to make sure that we can restore trust in the system. Most recently, the shooting at Magruder, the fact that these kids decided to tweet about it instead of call 911, I think that's a red flag. I think it's a red flag for our county that people just inherently are not trusting the system to work for them.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but that's why I'm running. And that's why most of my team are actually college students, as it turns out. I mean, they are devoted because they've seen what's happened in their last, 18 to 21 years. They've seen what's happened in the last few years, and they're tired of it. And they're not afraid to fight for something better. And so what I would do as state's attorneys, I've kind of hinted at this earlier in our broadcast, but really it starts at the juncture after a police make an arrest, after they're sent to the commissioners. When it lands in the state's attorney's office, what do you do? It's not just about looking at the facts to determine what charges are filed, but what's really going on here. And why is it happening here? And that's where the racial justice analyst, the social worker, and the data analyst really come into play, along with the prosecutor that determines what charges are possibly one can go forward on. But to look at it holistically is the change that we need to avoid situations like New Jersey from happening. Now, I know that the change is not going to be easy. I was thinking about that as I'm looking at the video, like what could have been different? Change is not easy, but it must be done. It must be done. I mean, sometimes change is painful, but we come out of it a lot better and a lot stronger. Much like with COVID. It was very painful, but a lot of people are coming out. Some people are coming out stronger. Some people are not, but they will come out stronger. If we change the leadership, we can actually make that happen. So yeah, that video just it triggered me because I'm thinking what the officers are thinking. As a prosecutor, you have to think about what the officers are thinking in order to determine well, should I even go for it on this case? But I would, naturally, I'd not have to sit down with just the line officers, but with the chief of police at that point and say, we have to change the way we're doing this. Do we need a prosecutor in your training sessions to say this is not what you do? Do we need a racial justice class in police training? Have a prosecutor assigned to do that class. Those are things that we have to keep talking about here. I don't want to take up too much time because I can go on and on about use of force, but yeah, I definitely feel that we need to have a prosecutor that understands the racial injustice that occurs in the system and work to try to amend it and fix it.
Thank you so much. And Brandy, how would you address this and working with the state's attorney office? What do you see as you both come into office at how you can change some of this from happening here? We won't say from happening here. It has happened here before. And so to stop it from progressing and happening again.
Yeah, and I think, the first thing that I have to say, Yvette, is that I'm tired. I'm tired of seeing videos of violence and brutalization of Black bodies. And I'm tired, not only am I tired of that, but I'm tired of seeing people after they watch those videos say, well, we have to wait and see because we don't really know what happened, as if all of us don't have eyes. The disparity there is so clear. You literally have to be creating an alternate reality to pretend that it's not happening. This system is very much set up to target specific people, to define them as criminals. And those officers, they came up and without paying any attention to what was actually going on in the situation, they decided that one of those young people was a criminal who deserved to be slammed to the floor and that the other one was fine and could be allowed to wander off, even though he had been throwing most of those punches in that video. This is repeated over and over again, not only in the way that we look at this criminal justice system, but also in the way that we deal with public policy, in the way that we treat people when they come and they need support around housing, when they are trying to advocate for fair wages and protections in their workplaces. The reason why we have to say a slogan like Black Lives Matter is because it is so obvious that people do not treat the lives of Black and Brown people in the same way, and that we constantly have to assert our basic right to humanity. And this is part of the foundation of the United States. This is something that we have been building into law and policy for 4.5 decades now. The first case of disparate sentencing was in 1640. So we've been doing this for quite some time now. And as a council member, one of the top things is we need to have folks who are going to say boldly, this is racism. This is structural racism. This is how it operates. And not feel like, to make other people feel comfortable with their structural racism, that we're not going to talk about it like it really is. And then when we do have structures, things like our Racial Equity and Social Justice Act, the statements that it's supposed to produce, the plans that it's supposed to generate for different departments in our government, that we hold the county council as decision makers, as well as the administrative departments of our county, accountable to actually making progress on racial equity. And that includes not just saying, well, we're going to leave it at the status quo, because as we just saw, the status quo is built on a foundation of structural racism. And then we have to do some deep work in our communities, in the way that we think about public policy. And I want to take it back to something that Bernice was talking about toward the very beginning, about what we even define as criminal. Because we have to recognize that our definitions of crime and innocence, of who's a perpetrator and who's a victim, are very explicitly racialized. They're also very explicitly gendered. And we have certain people in our society who we decide from right out the gate are criminals, and other people who we decide right out the gate should be protected and given the benefit of the doubt at all costs. And so we will try and put young people on a school to prison pipeline when they are acting out from trauma in their work, in their schools, a wide variety of trauma, including the trauma they experience in school, the trauma that they experience in our society. But we will allow people who are wealthy landowners to do things that cause people to lose their lives because they don't enforce code. And we'll say, well, that's not crime. That's just they should pay some penalty and then be able to go on about their business. I am here and I'm running for office because I believe that there are lives in our county that are not being valued, that are consistently being marginalized, and that that's wrong, and that it has to be corrected. And that, you know, what one of the things that I'm committed to is that when I look at making legislation on the county council, I want to take the racial equity and social justice statements that the Office of Legislative Oversight produces and take them seriously. Because we have brilliant people in that office who are going through and rigorously analyzing legislation, and then folks are like, oh yeah, I guess I should maybe take that into account. Or maybe not, I don't know. It depends on what day it is. When we set up structures, you don't get to talk about being so proud of setting up a structure like this and then not taking it seriously. You don't get to talk about how you care about racial equity and social justice. And then when it comes to evaluating leadership for different departments or for things like the chief of police, you don't take it seriously. And yes, you are hearing me for folks who are worried, I don't know, is Brandy too angry? I am absolutely a Black and Latino woman.
I don't think you're too angry.
No. I know, because I know you all understand. I know you all understand that if you're not angry about structural racism, my question is why? My question is, why aren't you more upset about what we are seeing happen over and over again in our communities? Why are you okay with this status quo? And so I am excited to have someone like Bernice as a partner to really rigorously look at these systems as they manifest in the legislature, in the administrative branch, and in the judicial branch, and say, no, on every single front, we have got to start not talking about this, but actually doing something to change the structures so that they bring justice and so that we correct the centuries of injustice that we have allowed to accumulate and to continue impacting people to this very day.
I'm going to have to bring you guys both on time on again, because we're like, I can't believe we're at the hour. I cannot believe this. But I have to bring you guys both on again. And, you know, and I just want to say one thing. I was told, I was sitting in a Board of Education meeting and I was testifying on something about the educational system, of course. And one of the things that one of the individuals who they let go from this county, who was in a leadership position, he said, we have to make a paradigm shift and let the chips fall where they fall. But we have to make a paradigm shift and be willing to take the risk just to do what's right, regardless of those other loud voices out there. Do what is right for all the children, especially those marginalized children. Do what is right and do that paradigm shift and just get it done. And I will never forget it. You know, he made that statement. We start pushing it, and months later, he was gone from this county. So it goes from every level when you start wanting to do those shifts. But we have to call it out when we stand behind you with these shifts. And we have to have more people doing that. So I want you to book some closing comments. And Brandon, I'm gonna let you start, and then Brittany, I'm gonna let you finish your closing comments. I want you to wrap it up. The Invisible Man, did you have any last words? Because I know that
I did want to say something. I'll be brief. I hope that when they return, there will be office holders, because they certainly deserve to be in office.
Oh, yes.
The second thing is, I'm not going to take any more time. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Brandy. I'll let you wrap it up, and I'll give you a minute to tell us why should we vote for you, and how can people get more involved in your campaign. And then Bernice, I want you to finish off. Okay, Bernice.
Again, thank you, Dr. Butler. Thank you, Invisible Man, for coming and for providing this opportunity. It's been a real pleasure. what I want to say to folks is that this is our opportunity to make change. Voting is not the only place where we make change, but it's one of the key places that we can use our leverage and use our organized political power. So I want to make sure those primaries are on June 28th, 2022. You can vote in person. People should have been receiving their applications in the mail if they want to get mail-in ballots. And I encourage you to fill those out and to send those in. This is your opportunity to provide concrete support for the leadership of progressive Black women who are committed to making changes toward equity and justice. You can find out more about me by going on my website, brandyformontgomery.com. That's BRANDY, the number 4, Montgomery.com. That's where you can find out where to volunteer. That's where you can donate, because organizing these kinds of grassroots progressive campaigns takes money. That's where you can read more about the platform, and that's where you can share opportunities with friends. We're also online on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Brandy for Moco, BRANDY, the number 4, MOCO. It's a great place to follow us. We want to hear from you. We want you to get engaged. We want you to be spreading the word. Make sure that you are registered to vote and that you are ready to vote when it comes to those primaries on June 28th.
Thank you so much. Bernice.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Butler and the Visible Man, for just joining Brandy and I tonight. I'm honored to join you, Dr. Butler, again for this opportunity to talk to your viewers. So my name is Bernice Maricu North, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm a wife, mother, and daughter of immigrants. But I am someone that has had the courtroom experience as a lawyer and has had the experience in the community. And that is why I decided to step up and run for state's attorney for Montgomery County. This county is ready for a new vision of justice, and I am ready on day one to be that transformative visionary that the office desperately needs to match the needs of the Montgomery County. An office that focuses on seeking greater transparency and not afraid to hold not just police, but fellow prosecutors accountable to make sure that we are restoring trust in the system. We need a prosecutor that focuses on alternatives to incarceration, particularly at the screening level before it even gets to trial. Alternatives to incarceration should not just mean alternatives to jail at a sentencing. We're talking about pretrial. I mean, there's things that we can really be inventive and creative on regarding how are we getting people out of the system that don't necessarily need to be there. And we need to have a prosecutor that focuses on equity and fairness and how we're treating the accused and how we're treating the defense bar, as well as we're treating each other as prosecutors. We need to have an office that reflects the diversity of Montgomery County, and that's something that I'm very committed to as the next state's attorney. I'm not just talking about diversity as in hiring folks, but actually keeping them there. Diversity and inclusion is very much a part of my mantra in terms of what's necessary for our office going forward. And we also need a prosecutor that focuses on restoring and stabilizing communities, being creative on how we're dealing with restorative justice, particularly for our youth, because they are in crisis right now. As you saw in the video in New Jersey, we're not immune to it in Montgomery County, especially with the rise in ghost guns being used and being seized in the county among young people. We have to really, really imagine how we're doing juvenile justice beyond truancy court. We need to think about how we're diverting them out of the system and making sure we're dealing with their mental health. Because as the students have been crying about for quite some time now, they want counselors and not cops. So we need to figure out how to bring restorative justice to them because they're our future. They're the ones that are going to take care of us when we're old. And this county has a lot of young people and a lot of old people in it. And it's diverse county, and we need to have a prosecutor that understands all the complexities in that diversity and still is committed to keeping everyone safe regardless of their background, income, or race. And so that's the kind of prosecutor that I think Montgomery County deserves, and that's why I stepped up, because I didn't see anybody else doing what I know I can do for this county.
And how can we get involved in your campaign?
Yes, and so my website is my last name, maricunorth.com, MIREKU North.com. My social media handle is the same, MIREKU North.com. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm dabbling to TikTok, so to be determined. and I'm dabbling in YouTube as well. But we're really trying to be expansive in our social media. That is a handle that goes through my website and through my social media handles. And the best way to really help this campaign is to offer your volunteering services and to donate. My race, unlike the county council races, is not subject to public financing, which means every dollar that I earn is not matched by the government. It's not matched. In this race that's serving over 1 million people is definitely not an easy race to raise money on. And what we don't want to have the mistake of is having someone have all the money, but not having the vision and ideas. And if you like what I heard tonight, visit my website and drop as much money as you can, whether it's $1, $2. It means a lot. Having the community support, truly having grassroots fundraising is what fuels me. And, I've been grateful to get $2. I've been grateful to get 2,000. I'm grateful to get 100. I'm grateful to get 50. The fact that people take the time out to open their wallets or, get their credit card or Apple Pay and provide those few bucks, is amazing because you're invested in the vision that Montgomery County needs. And so that's really the best way to help. I have an open house for my campaign office on the 27th in White Oak. So if you email me at bernice@mariconorth.com, I'll send you the details and we'll get on the website shortly. But invite folks to spread the word about it and come visit the office so you can get to see me in person and learn more about the campaign.
Well, I want to thank you both so very much for spending your wonderful Friday. And it was a pretty nice day, a little cold and windy. But remember, we're talking about Montgomery County. Your dollars can come from other outside of Montgomery County. Do not think you're restricted in donating just because you don't live within this state or this county. We can take dollars. Both of these individuals can take dollars from other places. A certain percent can come from outside of the county. So please make sure, if you're not locally within this area and you like what you hear, because we can be the county that makes change that can cause a ripple effect around the country. So help our county make that change. And once again, I want to thank my wonderful guests for being here. I also want to thank my co-host, Invisible Man. We now got you. We're hopefully no more computer problems.
I hope not.
I want to thank Wonderful. And I do want to thank Afrique Today for this time with you. And remember, we now have all of our videos archived, so you can always go back and look at them and share them. Because I think what happened tonight and what was discussed tonight, these young ladies here, more people need to see it, hear it. And remember, we all have pockets. They might not be that deep, but we all have pockets. So let's pull a little bit out and let's give a little bit to the candidates. Thank you again, and we will see you next week.